The rope moves at dawn, pulling taut against the granite face with a sound like a bowstring drawn for battle. No hands guide it, no climbers remain to claim it. Yet every morning for 10 years, the frayed orange line has performed this impossible ritual, defying physics and haunting the dreams of everyone who knows its story. Sarah Chun presses her face against the cold window of the mountain rescue helicopter, watching the familiar outline of Glacier Ridge emerge from the pre-dawn mist. The jagged peaks slice through clouds like broken teeth, their snow-covered faces. Catching the first pale light of October 15th, exactly 10 years since 5 climbers vanished without explanation from the mountain's notorious north face. "You sure about this?" Pilot Jake Morrison calls over the rotor noise, his weathered hands steady on the controls, despite the skepticism in his voice. "Could just be thermal expansion, wind patterns. Mountains play tricks." Sarah doesn't respond immediately. Her fingers trace the edges of a photograph tucked into her jacket pocket, 5 young faces grinning at the camera. Ice axes raised in triumph after their successful summit of Mount Washington just weeks before they disappeared. Her brother, David's laugh seems to echo from the image, the same infectious joy that had convinced her to take up climbing in the first place. "It's not tricks," she says finally, her breath fogging the glass. "I've been monitoring this ridge for a decade." The rope moves at exactly 6:47 a.m. every morning, regardless of weather conditions. That's not physics, Jake. That's something else. The helicopter banks left, following the familiar route toward base camp. Below them, the Glacier Ridge Trail winds through dense pine forests before breaking into exposed granite and ice fields. Sarah has hiked this path countless times, first as a grieving sister desperate for answers, then as a search and rescue coordinator determined to solve the mystery that claimed her brother and his climbing partners. The original search lasted 3 weeks. Teams combed every accessible route, following crampon marks and equipment fragments that painted a picture of a normal ascent gone catastrophically wrong. The 5 climbers, David Chun, Maria Santos, Alex Thompson, Rachel Park, and Jake Wilson, had been experienced mountaineers with solid safety records. Their permits were in order, their gear was top quality, and their planned route was well within their capabilities. Then they simply ceased to exist. No bodies were recovered. No emergency beacons activated. The only trace left behind was a single orange climbing rope, secured to an anchor point on the north face and extending down into a crevasse that rescue teams couldn't safely reach. The rope became a memorial of sorts, too dangerous to retrieve, but too significant to abandon. Until it started moving. Sarah first noticed the phenomenon 3 years after the disappearance, during one of her annual memorial climbs. She'd positioned herself on an opposing ridge with binoculars, hoping to spot some detail the original search teams had missed. At exactly 6:47 a.m., the rope had gone taut with a sharp snap that carried across the valley. She dismissed it initially mountain. Guides often spoke of equipment shifting due to temperature changes or settling snow. But when she returned the following year with better observation equipment, the same thing happened. Same time, same duration. Same impossible tension that suggested something was pulling from below. "Base camp coming up," Jake announces, interrupting her thoughts. The helicopter settles onto a flat meadow surrounded by equipment caches and weather-beaten tents. Sarah recognizes several vehicles in the makeshift parking area, Dr. Elena Vasquez's research van, the familiar Forest Service trucks, and a sleek black SUV that doesn't belong to any agency she knows. As the rotors wind down, 3 figures emerge from the largest tent. Dr. Vasquez approaches first, her silver hair whipping in the downdraft as she waves. Behind her, Forest Ranger Tom Bradley moves with the careful gait of someone whose knees have logged too many mountain miles. The third person hangs back, a tall woman in expensive outdoor gear, who watches Sarah's arrival with calculating eyes. "Sarah!" Elena calls out, her voice carrying the slight accent that betrays her childhood. In Argentina. Perfect timing. We've got some interesting developments to show you. Sarah shoulders her pack and walks toward the group, noting the tension in their body language. Elena's usual warm smile seems forced, and Tom keeps glancing toward the mystery woman as if seeking permission to speak. Dr. Chun, the stranger steps forward, extending a manicured hand. I'm Detective Linda Morrison, Seattle PD. I understand you've been documenting unusual activity on this mountain. The name clicks. Morrison, same as her pilot. Jake's sister? Unfortunately, yes. He called me after your last conversation about the rope phenomenon. I have to admit, I was skeptical until I saw Elena's data. Elena produces a tablet, swiping through graphs and photographs. We've been monitoring the rope site with motion sensors and time-lapse cameras for the past 6 months. The activity is completely consistent 6:47 a.m., plus or minus 30 seconds, regardless of weather conditions or seasonal variations. Sarah studies the data, her pulse quickening. The graphs show clear spikes in tension and movement, exactly as she's observed. But there's something else, smaller fluctuations throughout each day, as if the rope is responding to some external force in a pattern too complex for random movement. There's more, Tom adds quietly. Show her the audio recordings. Elena's finger hovers over a play button. We captured this yesterday morning. You might want to sit down. The sound that emerges from the tablet speakers sends ice through Sarah's veins. It's faint but unmistakable, a rhythmic scratching, like fingernails on stone, coming from deep within the crevasse. The scratching follows a pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. That's impossible, Sarah whispers, but her hands are shaking as she grips the tablet. The crevasse drops over 300 feet into solid ice. Nothing could survive down there for 10 years. Detective Morrison exchanges a look with Elena. That's what we thought too. But yesterday, something else happened that changes everything. She produces her own device, scrolling to a photograph that makes Sarah's breath catch. It's a close-up of the crevasse wall, taken with a high-powered camera lens. Carved into the ice, barely visible but unmistakably deliberate, are letters. LP. Sarah stares at the image, her mind racing. The letters are fresh, the ice around them shows recent tool marks that couldn't have survived a decade of freeze-thaw cycles. Someone is down there. Someone who knows how to carve letters in ice and send SOS signals through a climbing rope. We're organizing a technical rescue for first light tomorrow, Detective Morrison continues. I know this is personal for you, but I need to ask, are you prepared for what we might find down there? Sarah looks up from the photograph, her brother's face swimming in her memory. 10 years of questions. 10 years of wondering if she could have done something different. 10 years of that rope mocking her with its impossible morning ritual. Detective, she says, her voice steady despite the storm building in her chest. I've been preparing for this moment since the day David disappeared. The wind picks up across the meadow, carrying with it the scent of coming snow and something else. Something that makes the hair on Sarah's neck stand up, from somewhere. High above them, barely audible over the mountain's eternal whisper, comes the sound of scratching on stone. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. The scratching stops the moment they all look up toward the ridge. Sarah feels the silence like a physical weight, pressing down on the base camp with an intensity that makes her ears ring. The wind continues to move through the pines, but the rhythmic sound from above has vanished as if someone or something realized it was being observed. Did you all hear that? Tom Bradley asks, his ranger's instincts sharp despite 20 years of mountain service that should have dulled his capacity for surprise. Detective Morrison nods grimly. Same pattern as the recordings. It's like they know we're here. Elena closes her tablet with shaking fingers. In my 30 years of glacial research, I've never encountered anything like this. Ice doesn't preserve organic matter for a decade, especially not in a dynamic crevasse system. The thermal cycles. Alone should have. Should have what? Sarah interrupts, her patience fraying. Should have killed anyone down there? Should have destroyed any evidence? Should have made it impossible for my brother to be scratching SOS signals into ice walls? The words hang between them like an accusation. Sarah knows she's being unfair. Elena has donated countless hours to monitoring the site, driven by scientific curiosity and genuine compassion. But 10 years of official explanations and rational theories have left Sarah allergic to the word should. I'm sorry, she adds quickly. I just need to understand what we're dealing with. Elena's expression softens. What we're dealing with defies explanation. That's why Linda contacted me in the first place. Detective Morrison gestures toward the largest tent. Why don't we continue this inside? I have some additional information. That might help explain why I'm really here. The tent's interior surprises Sarah with its sophistication. Instead of camping gear, she finds a mobile command center complete with communication equipment, detailed topographical maps, and what appears to be a comprehensive case file spread across a folding table. Seattle PD doesn't usually investigate missing persons cases from 10 years ago, Morrison explains, noticing Sarah's expression. Especially not ones outside our jurisdiction. But 3 months ago, we received a tip that changed everything. She opens a manila folder and extracts a photograph. This was taken by a hiker in the North Cascades, about 40 miles from here. Look at the background. Sarah studies the image, a typical summit selfie showing a grinning couple with peaks stretching behind them. But in the far distance, barely visible without magnification, is an orange line against gray granite. That's not our rope, Tom says immediately. Wrong mountain, wrong orientation. Exactly, Morrison agrees. But it's the same brand, same diameter, and according to the hiker who took this photo, it also moves at dawn. Sarah's mouth goes dry. There's another one. 2 others, actually. Maybe more. Morrison spreads additional photographs across the table. Mount Baker, Mount Rainier. Different peaks, but the same phenomenon. Orange climbing ropes appearing in impossible locations, moving at precisely 6:47 a.m. Elena leans forward, her scientific mind engaged despite the impossibility of what she's seeing. The timing correlation is remarkable, but what's the connection? Why these specific mountains? That's what we're trying to figure out, Morrison replies. The North Cascades incident happened 8 years ago, 2 years after your brother's team disappeared. Mount Baker was 6 years ago, Rainier was 4. Each incident involved experienced climbers who vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a rope that shouldn't exist in the location where it's found. Sarah sinks into a camp chair, overwhelmed by the implications. You're saying David's team wasn't the first? Or the last? Morrison opens another folder, this one thick with missing person reports. I've been tracking similar disappearances across the Pacific Northwest dating back 15 years. Small groups of climbers, always experienced, always on technical routes that require specialized equipment. She slides a timeline across the table. Names and dates stretch back to 2008, each entry representing someone's child, sibling, or parent who walked into the mountains and never came home. Sarah recognizes some of the names cases that made regional news before fading into the bureaucratic limbo of unsolved disappearances. The pattern becomes clear when you map the locations. Morrison continues, unrolling a large topographical chart. Red pins mark each disappearance site, connected by lines that form an irregular but unmistakable shape, stretching from the Canadian border to the Columbia River Gorge. It's following the volcanic chain, Elena breathes, her finger tracing the pattern. Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, Mount Rainier. These disappearances are happening along the Cascade Range's most geologically active areas. Tom Bradley has been silent throughout the presentation, But now he speaks with the authority of someone who spent decades in these mountains. There are stories, native legends about the peaks, about things that live in the deep places where the earth breathes fire. Morrison raises an eyebrow. Stories? The Yakama and Muckleshoot tribes have oral traditions about certain peaks being ... hungry, places where the mountain spirits take offerings in exchange for safe passage. But those are just myths, Sarah finishes. Like moving ropes and SOS signals from empty crevasses. The tent falls silent, except for the whisper of wind against fabric. Outside, the afternoon light is beginning to fade, casting long shadows across the base camp. Sarah can feel the weight of the mountain pressing down on them, as if Glacier Ridge itself is listening to their conversation. There's something else, Morrison says quietly. She reaches into her jacket and produces a small evidence bag containing what appears to be a piece of metal. This was found at the Mount Baker site last month. Sarah takes the bag and examines its contents. The metal is twisted and blackened, but she can make out partial letters stamped into its surface. ... Amit Pro ... Summit Pro, she whispers. That's the brand of ice axe David carried. The same brand used by at least 3 other missing climbing teams, Morrison confirms. But here's the thing, this piece was found at the surface, not in a crevasse. It appeared overnight, placed on a boulder near the rope site, like someone wanted it to be discovered. Elena extends her hand for the evidence bag. The metal shows signs of extreme temperature exposure. Look at these stress fractures. This has been subjected to heat that would melt most alloys. Heat from what? Tom asks. Geothermal activity, maybe. Or ... double quotes. Elena hesitates. Sarah, what do you know about your brother's research interests? Did he ever mention volcanic geology or underground thermal systems? Sarah searches her memory. David had been passionate about climbing, but he'd also been a graduate student in earth sciences at the University of Washington. His thesis project had something to do with seismic monitoring, though she'd never paid close attention to the details. He was studying earthquake prediction. She says slowly, something about microtremors and thermal signatures. He spent a lot of time in the lab analyzing data from seismic stations throughout the Cascades. Morrison and Elena exchange a meaningful look. Did he ever mention discovering anything unusual in that data? Morrison asks. I don't know. We didn't talk much about his academic work. Sarah feels a stab of guilt. She'd been so focused on her own life, her own career, that she'd never shown much interest in David's research. Now 10 years too late, those conversations might hold the key to understanding what happened to him. I need to see his research, she says suddenly. His thesis notes, his data, everything he was working on before the climb. The university sealed his files after the disappearance, Tom points out. Academic privacy rules. Not if there's an active investigation, Morrison corrects. I can get access, but it might take a few days. Sarah shakes her head. We don't have a few days. You said the rescue operation starts at first light tomorrow. If there's something in David's research that explains what's happening here, we need to know before we go down into that crevasse. Outside the tent, the temperature is dropping rapidly as evening approaches. The scratching sound hasn't returned, but Sarah can feel something watching them from the heights above. The orange rope hangs motionless against the granite face, waiting for dawn to perform its impossible dance once again. There's another option, Elena says quietly. David's climbing partner, Alex Thompson. His sister Rachel was on the team, too, but his girlfriend wasn't. She might have copies of his research notes, or at least know what he was working on. Morrison flips through her folder. Melissa Hartley. She filed the initial missing person report. Lives in Seattle, works as a software engineer for Microsoft. Sarah checks her watch. It's only 4 hours by car. I could be there and back by midnight. Too dangerous in the dark, Tom objects. These mountain roads, I'll go with her, Morrison interrupts. I need to interview Melissa anyway. And if Sarah's right about the timing, we can't afford to wait. Elena stands up, gathering her equipment. I'll stay here and continue monitoring. If the rope moves tonight, if the pattern changes at all, you'll know immediately. As they prepare to leave, Sarah takes one last look at the evidence spread. Across the table, missing persons reports, geological surveys, twisted metal that shouldn't exist. Somewhere in this collection of impossibilities is the truth about what happened to David and his team. The sound of scratching drifts down from the ridge again, faint but unmistakable. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Sarah closes her eyes and listens, trying to hear something beyond the desperate rhythm of SOS. For just a moment, she could swear the scratching spells out a word: hurry. The drive to Seattle unfolds in tense silence, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of tires on asphalt and the occasional crackle of Morrison's police radio. Sarah stares out the passenger window, watching the mountains recede into darkness while her mind churns through the day's revelations. Every mile puts more distance between her and the rope that has haunted her dreams for a decade, but somehow she feels closer to David than she has in years. Tell me about your brother, Morrison says as they merge onto I-90. What was he like? Before the climbing? Sarah considers the question. Most people who knew David remembered him as the adventurous one, the risk-taker who convinced others to push their limits. But that wasn't the whole story. Careful, she says finally. Obsessively careful. He planned everything down to the last detail: gear lists, weather windows, backup routes. He used to joke that his climbing partners called him Professor, because he'd spend hours researching a route before attempting it. Doesn't sound like someone who'd take unnecessary risks. That's what made his disappearance so impossible to accept. David wouldn't have led a team onto a dangerous route without extensive preparation. And he definitely wouldn't have ignored safety protocols. Morrison navigates through Seattle's evening traffic with practiced efficiency. What about his research? You said he was studying earthquake prediction? Seismic monitoring, specifically. He was trying to develop better early warning systems by analyzing microtremors, tiny earthquakes that happen before major events. His advisor thought he was onto something significant. Significant enough to attract unwanted attention? Sarah turns to study Morrison's profile in the dashboard light. You think his research got him killed? I think your brother discovered something that certain people didn't want discovered. The pattern of disappearances, the geographic distribution along volcanic peaks, it's too organized to be random. They exit the freeway into Seattle's capital Hill neighborhood, where narrow streets wind between coffee shops and vintage clothing stores. Melissa Hartley's apartment building rises 6 stories above a corner market, its brick facade softened by ivy and fire escapes lined with potted plants. Morrison parks across the street and studies the building. Remember, we don't know what Melissa's been told about the investigation. If she's been contacted by whoever's behind this, you really think there's a conspiracy? Sarah interrupts. I think 5 experienced climbers don't vanish without help. And I think someone's been working very hard to make sure those disappearances stay unsolved. The building's security system accepts Morrison's badge, and they ride the cramped elevator to the 4th floor in silence. Apartment 4B sits at the end of a narrow hallway decorated with watercolor paintings of mountain landscapes, an ironic touch that makes Sarah's chest tighten. Morrison knocks 3 times, identifying herself through the door. After a moment, they hear the sound of multiple locks being disengaged. Melissa Hartley appears in the doorway looking exactly as Sarah remembered her from Alex's funeral, petite. Dark-haired, with intelligent eyes that seem to take in everything at once. But 10 years have added worry lines around those eyes, and her smile seems forced. Sarah Chun, Melissa says, surprise coloring her voice. I wasn't expecting. Detective. Morrison said this was about Alex's case, but I thought it was closed. New evidence has come to light, Morrison explains. May we come in? Melissa's apartment reflects the organized mind of a software engineer. Books line every available wall space, technical manuals mixed with climbing guides and geological surveys. A large desk dominates one corner, supporting multiple monitors displaying scrolling code and data visualizations. You're still climbing, Sarah observes, noticing the gear rack near the window. Not really. I mean, I try, but... Melissa gestures helplessly. It's different now. Everything feels different. Morrison settles into a chair across from the couch where Melissa and Sarah sit. We're hoping you can help us understand what Alex and David were working on before the climb. Specifically, David's research project. Melissa's expression grows guarded. Why? What does that have to do with what happened on Glacier Ridge? We're not sure yet, Sarah admits. But there's evidence suggesting the disappearance might be connected to David's seismic monitoring work. Evidence? Melissa stands abruptly, moving to the window where she stares out at the city lights. What kind of evidence? Morrison exchanges a glance with Sarah before answering. The kind that suggests your boyfriend and his climbing partners might still be alive. The words hit Melissa like a physical blow. She grips the window frame, her knuckles white against the dark glass. That's impossible. It's been 10 years. The search teams found nothing. Nothing. Except a rope that moves by itself every morning at dawn, Sarah says quietly. Melissa turns around slowly, her face pale. You've seen it too? The admission hangs in the air like a confession. Morrison leans forward, her detective instincts sharp. You know about the rope? I've been monitoring it for 3 years, Melissa whispers. Ever since I developed the software. She moves to her desk and begins typing rapidly. The center monitor fills with a familiar image, Glacier Ridge's north face, viewed through what appears to be a high-resolution webcam. Even in the darkness, Sarah can make out the orange line against the granite. Custom surveillance system. Melissa explains. Motion detection, automated alerts, continuous recording. I get a notification every morning at 6:47 when the rope moves. Morrison stands up to study the display. This is a felony, you know. Unauthorized surveillance of a restricted area. I know, I don't care. Melissa's voice carries 10 years of suppressed grief and desperate hope. Everyone told me to move on, to accept that Alex was gone. But I'm a systems analyst. I understand patterns, and this pattern doesn't make sense. She opens another window showing a database filled with timestamps and measurements. The rope movement isn't random. It follows a mathematical sequence, Fibonacci spirals, prime number intervals, recursive algorithms that would require sophisticated programming to generate. Sarah stares at the data, remembering David's fascination with mathematical patterns in natural systems. David would have recognized this. He did recognize it, Melissa says. That's why they went to Glacier Ridge in the first place. The revelation hits like a thunderbolt. Morrison sits back down. Heavily, explain. Melissa pulls up another file, a document titled Thermal Anomaly Analysis, Cascade Range Survey. David's name appears as the primary author, with Alex Thompson listed as research assistant. 2 weeks before the climb, David discovered something in his seismic data. Temperature signatures that didn't match known geothermal activity. The patterns were too regular, too organized. He thought he'd found evidence of undiscovered volcanic chambers. Sarah reads over Melissa's shoulder as she scrolls through the document. The language is technical, but the implications are clear. David and Alex had identified thermal anomalies beneath several cascade peaks, anomalies that suggested vast underground networks of heated chambers. They weren't going to Glacier Ridge for recreation, Melissa continues. They were going to collect samples to prove David's theory about interconnected volcanic systems. What theory? Morrison asks. Melissa opens a final file, a video recording that shows David sitting in what appears to be a university lab. He looks excited, energized in the way Sarah remembered from their childhood when he discovered something fascinating. The Cascade. Range isn't just a chain of individual volcanoes, David says to the camera. It's a single integrated system connected by thermal conduits running hundreds of miles underground. And something is using those conduits. Sarah's breath catches. Using them for what? That's what we were going to find out, Melissa says. But they never came back. On the monitor, the Glacier Ridge webcam shows the first hint of dawn approaching. The eastern peaks. Sarah checks her watch. 6:45 a.m. 2 minutes until the rope performs its impossible dance. There's something else, Melissa says quietly. Something I've never told anyone. She opens a new window displaying what appears to be audio analysis software. Waveforms scroll across the screen, showing sound patterns recorded over several months. The rope movement generates vibrations that travel through the granite. I've been analyzing those vibrations, converting them to audio frequencies. She hovers her mouse over a play button. This is what the mountain has been saying every morning for 3 years. The sound that emerges from the speakers makes Sarah's blood freeze. It's David's voice, distorted and fragmented, but unmistakably his, speaking words that shouldn't exist. Sarah, if you're listening, we're running out of time. Outside the window, the first rays of sunlight touch Glacier Ridge's summit. On the webcam monitor, the orange rope snaps taut with mechanical precision, beginning its daily ritual. But this time, it's different. This time, the rope isn't just moving, it's swinging in a pattern that spells out letters against the granite face. You orar. The apartment falls silent, except for the hum of computer fans and the distant sound of Seattle. Traffic. Sarah stares at the webcam monitor, watching the rope spell out its impossible message against the dawn-lit granite. Her brother's voice echoes in her memory, distorted but unmistakably real. Play it again, she whispers. Melissa's finger hovers over the audio file. Sarah, you should know there are other recordings. Dozens of them. Different voices, different messages. All from people who should be dead. Morrison leans forward, her detective instincts overriding her disbelief. Other missing climbers? Alex, Rachel, Maria, Jake, all of them. And voices I don't recognize. People who must have disappeared before David's team. Melissa's hands shake as she navigates through folders of audio files. They're not just random sounds. They're coordinated communications. She opens a new interface showing a timeline stretching back 4 years. Each entry represents a decoded message, brief fragments of speech extracted from the rope's vibrational patterns. Sarah recognizes her brother's voice in several entries, but there are others, desperate pleas for help, technical instructions, and something that chills her more than anything else, reports. Status updates, Melissa explains, noticing Sarah's expression. They're giving regular reports about their situation. Temperature readings, structural assessments, equipment inventories. Like they're part of some kind of organized operation. Morrison studies the timeline. These messages, they're not random distress calls. They're intelligence reports. That's what I thought too. Melissa opens another file. Look at this message from 3 months ago. David's voice crackles through the speakers again, clearer. This time, thermal expansion in Sector 7. New arrivals from Baker site show signs of hypothermic conditioning. Recommend accelerated timeline for surface contact. Sarah feels the world tilt around her. New arrivals? Baker site. The Mount Baker disappearances, Morrison says grimly. The climbers who vanished there, they're not dead. They're being moved. Melissa nods, her face pale. There's an entire network down there. Underground facilities connected by the thermal conduits David discovered. And they're not natural formations. She brings up a new display, a three-dimensional model that shows the Cascade Range. From below, glowing lines connect the major peaks, forming a web of tunnels and chambers that extends from the Canadian border to Mount Shasta in Northern California. This is based on David's original research combined with 3 years of vibrational analysis, Melissa explains. The thermal signatures aren't volcanic, they're artificial. Someone has built a massive underground complex using the natural geothermal energy of the volcanic chain. Morrison stands up abruptly, her phone in her hand. I need to contact the FBI. This is way beyond local jurisdiction. No, Sarah says sharply. You heard David's message. They're running out of time. If we involve federal agencies, it could take weeks to organize a response. Sarah, if there's a criminal organization operating underground facilities, then my brother and his friends have been prisoners for 10 years, and we might be their only chance for rescue. The webcam monitor shows the rope settling back into its normal position as dawn fully breaks over Glacier Ridge, but the message it spelled out lingers in their minds. Hurry, Melissa saves the audio files to an encrypted drive. There's more. Over the past month, the communications have become more urgent. They're planning something, an escape attempt, or maybe a signal for rescue. But they need surface support. What kind of support? Morrison asks, sitting back down. Technical assistance. The thermal conduits that connect the underground facilities also carry communication signals. But the system requires periodic maintenance from the surface specifically. Calibration of the rope anchors that serve as transmission points. Sarah stares at the geological model, understanding dawning. The ropes aren't just markers. They're antennas, exactly. And according to the latest messages, several anchor points are failing. If they lose too many communication nodes, the survivors will be cut off completely. Morrison rubs her temples. How many anchor points are we talking? About 15 confirmed sites throughout the Cascade Range. But Glacier Ridge is the primary hub, the main communication relay that coordinates all the others. If we lose that signal... She doesn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah can see it in her expression, hear it in the desperation of David's recorded voice. 10 years of survival in an underground prison, and their lifeline to the surface is failing. The rescue operation, Sarah says suddenly, the one planned for this morning. If they lower someone into the crevasse and damage the rope system, it could cut off all communication permanently, Melissa finishes. Morrison checks her watch. It's 7:15. The technical rescue team was scheduled to begin descent at 8 o'clock. We need to stop them. She's already dialing her phone when Melissa grabs her arm. Wait, look at this. A new message has appeared on the monitoring system, transmitted just moments ago through the Glacier Ridge relay. This time it's not David's voice, but a woman's clear and urgent, despite the electronic distortion. Surface team, this is Dr. Maria Santos. Emergency protocols in effect. Facility compromised. Unknown actors have breached outer perimeter. Require immediate extraction, all personnel. Warning, hostile forces moving toward primary communication. Node, defend anchor point at all costs. The message cuts off, replaced by static and the sound of what might be gunfire echoing through underground chambers. Sarah's knees go weak. Maria Santos, the geologist who had been part of David's climbing team. After 10 years, she's not only alive, but apparently serving as some kind of communications officer for the underground survivors. This changes everything, Morrison says, her phone still pressed to her ear. If there are hostile forces involved. She's interrupted by the sound of her phone connecting. Tom, it's Linda. You need to abort the rescue operation immediately. Do not approach the rope site. I repeat, do not. The line goes dead. Morrison stares at her phone in disbelief. No signal. That's impossible. I was getting 5 bars a minute ago. Melissa's computers begin displaying error messages as her internet connection fails. The webcam feed from Glacier Ridge flickers and goes black. Even the apartment's landline produces only silence when Morrison tries to use it. Communication blackout, Sarah realizes. Someone's jamming all signals in the area. Through the apartment window, they can see other residents checking their phones and looking confused. Street lights begin flickering, and car alarms start going off randomly as electronic systems throughout the neighborhood malfunction. We have to get back to base camp, Sarah says, grabbing her jacket. If Tom and Elena identify yourselves. The tactical team immediately shifts focus toward this new threat, giving Morrison the opening she needs. She floors the accelerator, smashing through a section of concrete barrier that leads to an emergency vehicle ramp. The cruiser emerges onto a side street where Tom Bradley's Forest Service truck sits with its engine running. Elena Vasquez waves frantically from the passenger seat, gesturing for them to follow. How did they find us? Melissa asks as Morrison navigates through Seattle's maze of one-way streets. Same way they found the underground survivors, Sarah realizes. The communication system works both ways. If they've been monitoring the rope transmissions, they know everything we know. Morrison's radio crackles to life despite the electronic jamming. Tom's voice comes through, distorted but clear. Linda, we've got bigger problems. Base camp was hit 20 minutes ago. Elena's equipment was destroyed, but we managed to extract some data before they arrived. What kind of data? Morrison responds. Elena's voice takes over the transmission. Seismic readings from the past 6 hours. There's been massive underground activity-controlled explosions, structural collapses. Someone's systematically destroying the thermal conduit network. Sarah feels ice in her veins. They're cutting off escape routes. Or preparing for a controlled demolition, Tom adds grimly. Sarah, I'm sorry, but if your brother and his team are down there, we may be too late to help them. No. The word comes out harder than Sarah intended. David's message said they were planning an escape attempt. They wouldn't give up after 10 years just to die in some underground explosion. They've reached the outskirts of Seattle, where the urban sprawl gives way to forested foothills. Morrison maintains radio contact with Tom as they race east toward the Cascade Range, but Sarah's attention is focused on Melissa's laptop. The computer engineer has managed to restore limited functionality to her monitoring system using a satellite uplink that somehow escaped the jamming. The geological model displays real-time seismic data, showing a disturbing pattern of activity throughout the underground network. Look at this, Melissa says, pointing to a cluster of red indicators near Mount Baker. These aren't random explosions. They're following a specific sequence outer nodes first, then moving toward the central hubs. Sarah studies the pattern. How long until they reach Glacier Ridge? Based on current progression. 3 hours, maybe less. Morrison pushes the cruiser harder, taking mountain curves at dangerous speeds. Behind them, Tom's truck keeps pace despite the rough terrain. The radio provides a steady stream of updates, none of them encouraging. Multiple aircraft inbound from the north, Tom reports. Military transport helicopters, probably carrying demolition equipment. Any word from the surface rescue team? Morrison asks. Negative. We've lost contact with everyone at the mountain. As they climb higher into the mountains, Sarah catches glimpses of aircraft moving against the pre-dawn sky. The operation to destroy the underground facility isn't just beginning, it's already well underway. There, Melissa says suddenly, pointing to her laptop screen. New transmission coming through the Glacier Ridge relay. David's voice emerges from the speakers, clearer than before, but strained with exhaustion. Surface team, this is Control. Facility evacuation in progress. Primary escape route compromised. Attempting emergency ascent through thermal shaft 7. Need immediate extraction support at grid reference. Static overwhelms the transmission before they can hear the coordinates. Thermal Shaft 7. Elena's voice crackles over the radio. I know that location. It's on the south face of Glacier Ridge, about 2 kilometers from the rope site. Sarah checks her watch. 2 hours and 15 minutes until the facility sterilization deadline. Even if they reach the mountain in time, finding the emergency exit in the darkness will be nearly impossible. Wait, Melissa says, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I can triangulate the transmission source using the seismic data. If David's team is moving through the underground network, their movement will generate vibrations. The laptop screen fills with a 3-dimensional map showing Glacier Ridge from below. Red dots move slowly through the tunnel system, representing the escaped survivors making their way toward the surface. They're heading for a thermal vent about halfway up the south face. But Sarah ... Melissa's voice trails off as she notices something on the display. What is it? They're not alone down there. Look at these other movement signatures. The map shows additional red dots converging on the survivor's position from multiple directions. The dots move faster, more aggressively, clearly in pursuit. How many? Sarah asks. Melissa counts quickly. 8 survivors, maybe 9. But at least 20 hostiles closing in. Morrison takes a sharp turn onto the Forest Service road that leads to Glacier Ridge. They're being hunted. The radio erupts with frantic transmissions as they approach the base of the mountain. Tom's voice cuts through the static. Multiple explosions on the north face. The rope site is gone. Repeat, primary communication node has been destroyed. Through the windshield, Sarah can see the glow of fires on the upper slopes of Glacier Ridge. The orange rope that had connected her to her brother for 10 years has finally been severed. But somewhere beneath the mountain, David and his team are still fighting to reach the surface. And for the first time in a decade, Sarah knows exactly where to find them. Tom, she says into the radio, we're going to need climbing gear. All of it. The Forest Service road ends in a chaos of emergency vehicles and personnel. Sarah counts at least 6 agencies represented: local search and rescue, state police, Forest Service rangers, and unmarked vehicles that suggest federal involvement. But the coordination she expects from a joint operation is absent. Instead, confusion reigns as different teams receive conflicting orders and radio communications fail intermittently. Morrison parks behind Tom's truck and immediately approaches. The incident commander, a harried-looking state trooper who's trying to manage the situation without reliable communications. Detective Morrison, Seattle PD, she identifies herself. What's the current status? Complete cluster, the trooper replies bluntly. We've got reports of explosions, missing rescue personnel, and some kind of electronic warfare jamming our equipment. Half my teams don't know what they're supposed to be doing. Sarah scans the organized chaos while Elena sets up her portable seismic monitoring equipment on the tailgate of Tom's truck. The mountain looms above them, its familiar silhouette now punctuated by occasional flashes of light and the distant rumble of underground explosions. There, Elena announces, pointing to her laptop screen. I'm picking up movement in Thermal Shaft 7. Multiple signatures heading toward the surface. Tom approaches with an armload of climbing gear ropes, harnesses, headlamps, and technical rescue equipment. I pulled everything from the ranger station. If we're going up there, we need to move fast. Melissa has managed to restore her communication link with the underground network, using a signal booster connected to Elena's equipment. The audio quality is poor, but David's voice is unmistakable. Control to surface team. We have 8 survivors. Approaching Thermal Shaft 7. Estimate 20 minutes to exit point. Be advised pursuit team is close behind. Repeat, we are being pursued. A new voice joins the transmission, Alex Thompson, speaking with the clipped precision of someone under extreme stress. Multiple hostile contacts in pursuit. They know our route. Someone's feeding them information. Sarah feels a chill that has nothing to do with the mountain air. There's a leak. Someone in the rescue operation is working with them. Morrison's expression hardens as she surveys the mixed crowd of emergency personnel. Or someone here isn't who they claim to be. Elena's seismic display shows the pursued survivors making steady progress upward through the thermal shaft. But the pursuing signals are gaining ground. They have maybe 15 minutes before those hostiles catch up, she reports. How long to reach the exit point? Sarah asks Tom. In the dark with technical climbing? 45 minutes minimum. The math is brutal. Even if they start immediately, David's team will be captured or killed long before surface support arrives. Sarah stares at the mountain, trying to find an alternative, when Melissa's laptop emits an urgent alert. New transmission, Melissa announces, adjusting her headphones. But this isn't coming from the survivors. A different voice emerges from the speakers, cold, professional, speaking with military authority. Hunter teams. This is Control. Targets are ascending through Shaft 7 as predicted. Intercept teams Alpha and Bravo maintain pursuit. Charlie. Team, position for surface containment. Sarah exchanges glances with Morrison. The hunters have their own communication system, and they're coordinating a pincer movement designed to trap the survivors both underground and at the surface. Tom, Morrison says urgently, we need to evacuate the area. If they have a surface. Containment team. Her words are cut off by the distant whine of helicopter rotors. 2 aircraft approach from the north, flying without navigation lights and moving with the purposeful speed of military operations. Everyone down, Tom shouts. The helicopters don't attack immediately. Instead, they circle the area like predators, their searchlights sweeping across the emergency vehicles and personnel. Sarah realizes they're identifying targets, separating legitimate rescue workers from potential threats. One helicopter lands in the Forest Service parking area while the other maintains overwatch. Tactical operatives deploy from the landed aircraft, moving with the same professional efficiency Sarah witnessed in Seattle. Federal agents, the lead operative announces, displaying credentials. This area is now under federal jurisdiction. All civilian personnel are ordered to evacuate immediately. The state trooper starts to object, but Morrison grabs his arm. Do it, she says quietly. Get your people out of here. As the legitimate rescue personnel begin their evacuation, Sarah notices that several individuals remain behind people she had assumed were part of the rescue operation, but who are now revealed as part of the containment team. We've been set up, she whispers to Tom. They used the rescue operation as cover to position their people. Elena quickly begins packing her seismic equipment, but she leaves one device running, a portable unit that continues monitoring the underground situation. The survivors are still ascending, she reports quietly. But the pursuit team is only minutes behind them. Melissa maintains her communication link, using an earpiece to monitor transmissions while appearing to comply with the evacuation order. Her face goes pale as she listens to the latest updates. David's team is trapped, she whispers. The thermal shaft has multiple exit points, but the surface team has them all covered. Sarah makes a decision that surprises even herself. Instead of joining the evacuation, she slips away from the group and heads toward her climbing gear. If the official rescue operation has been compromised, she'll mount her own. Tom notices her movement and intercepts her. Sarah, no. This is suicide. My brother has been trapped underground for 10 years, she replies, checking her climbing harness. I'm not walking away when he's 20 minutes from freedom. The hostile teams are expecting an organized rescue attempt using standard approach routes, Sarah finishes. They're not expecting the solo climber approaching from an unexpected direction. Morrison joins them, having noticed the conversation. You can't possibly reach them in time. I don't need to reach them, Sarah. explains, shouldering her pack. I just need to create enough of a distraction to give them a chance. Elena looks up from her equipment. There might be a way. The thermal shaft system creates natural updrafts. If you could trigger a significant disturbance at one of the auxiliary vents, it might force the pursuit team to take a longer route. She brings up a geological survey on her portable display. Here, thermal vent Delta 5, about 800 meters from the main exit point. A climbing charge or even a significant rockfall could create enough atmospheric disturbance to make the tunnel temporarily impassable. Tom studies the map. That's a Class 5 technical climb in full darkness. Then it's a good thing I've been training on this mountain for 10 years, Sarah replies. Melissa removes her earpiece and hands it to Sarah. Take this. I'll maintain the communication link from down here. When David's team reaches the surface, you'll be the first to know. As Sarah begins her ascent into the darkness, Elena's voice follows her through the radio. Sarah, you should know the seismic readings are showing increased thermal activity throughout the system. Whatever they're using to destroy the underground facility, it's destabilizing the entire volcanic network. Sarah pauses in her climb, looking back at the base camp where emergency lights are being extinguished to avoid detection. How long until catastrophic failure? If the pattern continues, less than an hour. The mountain itself is dying, Sarah realizes. The thermal conduits that have supported life underground for 10 years are being systematically destroyed. Even if David's team reaches the surface, they may only have minutes before the entire system collapses. She resumes climbing, her headlamp creating a small bubble of light in the vast darkness. Somewhere above her, her brother is fighting for his life. Somewhere below, the mountain is preparing to tear itself apart. And somewhere in between, Sarah climbs toward a reunion 10 years in the making. The earpiece crackles with David's voice, closer now and filled with desperate hope. Surface team, we can see light. We're almost there. Sarah's hands burn against the cold granite as she scales the near-vertical face of Glacier Ridge's south slope. The thermal vent Delta 5 lies just ahead, marked by wisps of steam that catch her headlamp beam like ghostly fingers beckoning her forward. Below, the scattered lights of the compromised base camp grow smaller, while above, the mountain's silence carries an ominous weight. The earpiece crackles with increasing urgency as David's team draws closer to the surface. Control to surface, we have visual on the exit shaft. Estimate 3 minutes to emergence. But another voice cuts through the transmission. Alex Thompson, his tone sharp with alarm. Movement in the main tunnel. They've found our route. Hunter team is 60 seconds behind us. Sarah pushes harder, her muscles screaming in protest as she navigates a particularly treacherous overhang. The thermal vent is close enough now that she can feel the warm air rising from the Earth's depths, carrying with it strange odors, not just sulfur and heated stone, but something else. Something organic and wrong. Sarah, Melissa's voice comes through the earpiece. The seismic readings are going crazy. Whatever's happening down there, it's accelerating. Sarah reaches the thermal vent just as Elena's equipment detects another massive underground explosion. The mountain shudders beneath her hands and loose rock cascades past her position. She can see the vent opening, now a natural chimney in the granite that vents superheated air from the underground network. Position reached, she reports breathlessly. Setting charges now. She pulls the climbing explosives from her pack, small-shaped charges designed for emergency rockfall clearance. Tom had included them in the gear kit, though Sarah doubts he expected her to use them to collapse a thermal vent. As she positions the charges around the vent opening, a new transmission cuts through the static. This time it's Maria Santos. Her voice tight with fear. All units, the advised facility destruction is ahead of schedule. Automated systems are initiating thermal core breach. We have less than 30 minutes before total collapse. Sarah's hands freeze on the detonator. 30 minutes. Not the hour Elena had estimated, but half that time. David's team needs to reach the surface and get clear of the mountain before the entire underground network implodes. David, she speaks into the earpiece, hoping her transmission reaches the survivors. This is Sarah. I'm at thermal vent Delta 5, preparing to create a distraction. When you hear the explosion, that's your signal to move. A pause, then David's voice closer to the surface now, clearer than she's heard it in 10 years. Sarah? My God, Sarah, is that really you? Tears blur her vision as she recognizes the voice that has haunted her dreams. It's me, David. I never stopped looking for you. Sarah, listen carefully, David says, his voice urgent. The people who took us, they're not just criminals. This entire operation, the underground facilities, they're harvesting something from the thermal vents, something that shouldn't exist. Alex Thompson's voice interrupts. Contact rear. They're in the shaft with us. The sound of gunfire echoes through the communication link, distorted by the underground acoustics but unmistakably violent. Sarah can hear shouting, the clatter of equipment, and what sounds like an inhuman roar that makes her skin crawl. What was that? She asks into the earpiece. Not now, David responds tersely. Sarah, when we reach the surface, we need immediate extraction. Don't trust anyone in an official capacity. The contamination. His transmission cuts off in a burst of static. Sarah tries to re-establish contact, but the communication link remains dead. Either David's team has been captured, or something has happened to their equipment. She makes the decision to detonate the charges anyway. If the hunter teams are using the thermal shaft system to pursue the survivors, collapsing Delta 5 might force them to take longer routes. The explosion sends a shockwave through the mountain that Sarah feels in her bones. The thermal vent collapses in on itself, and a geyser of superheated steam erupts from the destruction, carrying with it an odor so foul that Sarah gags behind her face mask. But the explosion has an unexpected consequence. As the steam clears, Sarah sees something emerging from the collapsed vent, something that definitely isn't geological in origin. Pale, segmented, and moving with purposeful intelligence, creatures the size of small cars begin pouring from the damaged thermal system. They move like arthropods, but with an alien coordination that suggests hive intelligence. Worst of all, they seem to be seeking warmth, specifically the heat signatures of living humans. Sarah scrambles away from the vent as more creatures emerge, their chittering calls echoing across the mountainside. These aren't rescue complications. They're the reason the underground facility is being destroyed. Her earpiece suddenly crackles back to life with multiple voices speaking over each other. Surface breach confirmed. Unknown biological entities emerging from multiple thermal vents. All containment teams fall back to secondary perimeter. Do not engage entities directly. Facility sterilization accelerated. All personnel evacuate immediately. And underneath it all, David's voice, barely audible. Sarah, if you can hear. The creatures are why we were taken. We were food sources, breeding stock for something that's been living in the thermal network for millions of years. The people running the facility, they were feeding us to them. Sarah feels her world tilt. 10 years of imagining her brother held captive by human traffickers, and the truth is something far worse. David and his team weren't just prisoners, they were livestock. David, where are you now? She transmits. 100 meters from surface exit. But Sarah, there are more of these things up there. They're not just in the thermal vents. They've been living in the mountain caves, and our escape has stirred them up. Sarah looks around and realizes David is right. Movement flickers at the edge of her headlamp, beam shadows that don't belong to rock formations, shapes that scuttle across vertical granite faces with impossible agility. New plan, she announces. I'm coming to you. She begins rappelling toward the main thermal shaft exit, using her knowledge of the mountain's geography to navigate by memory. The climbing is treacherous in the darkness, but fear drives her forward. After 10 years of wondering what happened to her brother, she's not losing him again to monsters from the Earth's depths. The main exit shaft comes into view, a circular opening in the granite face marked by rising steam and the orange glow of thermal activity. But as Sarah approaches, she sees why David's team hasn't emerged. The exit is blocked by a mass of the pale creatures, their bodies intertwined in a living barrier that seals the tunnel. They're not just random beasts, they're organized, working together to prevent escape. Sarah keys her radio. "Tom, Elena, Melissa, are you receiving?" Elena's voice responds immediately. "Sarah, thank God. Where are you?" "Main thermal exit. South face. David's team is trapped below by some kind of biological barrier. I need ideas fast." "Biological barrier?" Melissa's voice cuts in. "What do you mean biological?" Before Sarah can explain, the creatures blocking the exit begin to move. They're responding to something, a sound or vibration that Sarah can't detect. As they shift position, she catches a glimpse of human figures in the darkness below. David emerges first, supporting an injured woman who must be Maria Santos. Behind them come Alex Thompson and Rachel Park, both armed with improvised weapons that spark with electrical current. They're followed by 3 other people. Sarah doesn't recognize survivors from other missing climbing teams. But they're not just climbing out of the tunnel. They're fleeing from something even worse that's pursuing them from below. "Sarah!" David shouts, spotting her headlamp. "Get back! The Queen is coming!" The mountain trembles as something massive moves through the thermal shaft, something so large that its passage generates seismic activity. The pale creatures blocking the exit scatter in apparent terror, clearing the way for the survivors, but also revealing what's chasing them. Sarah gets her first clear look at David after 10 years, and her heart breaks. He's aged decades in the underground darkness, his hair gone white and his body bearing the scars of prolonged captivity. But his eyes still hold the intelligence and determination she remembers. "We need to get off this mountain," David says as soon as he reaches her position. The thermal network isn't just collapsing, something is being born down there. Something that's been gestating for millions of years, and our presence accelerated its development. As if summoned by his words, a roar emerges from the depths of Glacier Ridge that shakes loose rock from cliffsides across the entire range. It's not the sound of an animal or machine, but something else entirely, the birth cry of a creature older than human civilization. The mountain is coming alive, and it's hungry. The roar that emerges from Glacier Ridge's depths doesn't just shake the mountain, it reaches into Sarah's chest and vibrates her bones with a frequency that speaks to primal terror. David pulls her against the granite face as loose rock cascades. Around them, his grip surprisingly strong despite years of imprisonment. "Move now!" he shouts over the subsiding echoes. We have maybe 10 minutes before she breaks the surface. Sarah helps support Maria Santos, whose leg appears to be badly injured. Despite her condition, the geologist maintains her scientific composure. "The thermal readings we detected weren't volcanic," she explains as they begin their desperate descent. "They were metabolic. We've been living above something that's been hibernating for geological ages." "Living above it?" Sarah asks, trying to process the impossibility of what she's hearing. "Living inside it," Alex Thompson corrects grimly. "The thermal conduits, the underground chambers, they're not artificial structures. They're organs, digestive systems. We've been prisoners inside a creature the size of a mountain range." The revelation hits Sarah like physical blow. David and his team weren't just captured by human traffickers. They were consumed by something prehistoric, kept alive within its body for 10 years while it slowly digested their captors and fed on their life force. Rachel Park moves with the efficient urgency of someone who's lived with constant danger. The thermal network extends from Mount Baker to Mount Rainier, She explains as they navigate a particularly treacherous section of cliff face. It's not a chain of individual creatures, it's one organism using the volcanic activity to maintain its core temperature. What about the people running the facility? Sarah asks. The ones who took you? David's expression darkens. They thought they were in control. A genetics research consortium that discovered the creature in the 1980s. They believed they could harness its biological processes for pharmaceutical development. Instead, it turned them into a food delivery service. Another roar shakes the mountain closer this time. Sarah can feel vibrations through the rock face that suggest massive movement deep underground. Whatever is stirring beneath Glacier Ridge is preparing to emerge, and its awakening is accelerating the collapse of the entire thermal system. Sarah, Elena's voice crackles through the earpiece. Seismic readings are off the charts. You need to get clear of the mountain immediately. Working on it, Sarah responds, helping Maria navigate a narrow ledge. What's the evacuation status? Below, most official personnel have pulled back to the highway, but Tom and I are maintaining position with the vehicles. Melissa's tracking multiple heat signatures emerging from thermal vents throughout the range. As they descend, Sarah notices that David and his team move with an uncanny coordination, responding to threats and obstacles with almost telepathic efficiency. How are you doing that? She asks. 10 years of living inside a hive mind, Alex explains. The creature communicates through bioelectrical fields. Extended exposure creates a kind of neural linking between its food sources. You can read each other's minds? Not exactly, but we've developed enhanced spatial awareness and threat detection. It's probably the only reason we survived this long. They reach a relatively stable ledge where Sarah calls for a brief rest. Maria's injury is worse than initially apparent. Her leg shows signs of infection that suggests it's been untreated for days. But when Sarah examines the wound, she notices something disturbing. These aren't human bite marks, she observes. Maria nods grimly. The small ones, the creatures you saw at the thermal vents, they're like antibodies. The organism uses them to maintain internal hygiene, eliminate infections, remove dead tissue. They've been maintaining us. The implication makes Sarah's stomach turn. David and his team haven't just been prisoners. They've been preserved as living resources within a biological system that views them as a food source to be kept fresh until needed. The genetics consortium, Sarah says. What happened to them? Absorbed, David replies simply. The creature doesn't just consume flesh, it integrates knowledge, memory, experience. After 10 years, it knows everything we know about the surface world, our languages, our technology, our weaknesses. A new sound joins the mountain's geological groaning, something like breathing, but on a scale that suggests lungs the size of caverns. The creature is definitely preparing to surface, and its awakening is triggering responses throughout the thermal network. Sarah's earpiece erupts with frantic communications from the base camp. Multiple breaches confirmed along the ridgeline. Unknown biological entities emerging at grid references Delta 7, Echo 3, and Foxtrot 9. Foxtrot 9. Rachel mutters. That's directly above the creature's primary neural center. Neural center? Sarah asks. Think of it as the brain, Maria explains. The thermal vents aren't just feeding mechanisms, they're sensory organs. The creature has been monitoring surface activity for decades, learning our patterns, our behaviors. David checks his improvised weapon, a device that appears to combine climbing equipment with electrical components salvaged from the underground facility. It's been preparing for emergence, using our knowledge to plan its integration into the surface ecosystem. Integration? Global expansion, Alex says bluntly. This organism represents a form of life that predates complex multicellular evolution. If it reaches the surface with full knowledge of human civilization, it won't just be a local threat, it'll be an extinction event. The mountain shudders again, and this time Sarah can see movement on the slopes below them. Pale shapes emerge from newly opened fissures, moving with purpose toward the scattered emergency vehicles. The creature's antibody organisms aren't just emerging randomly, they're conducting coordinated strikes against potential threats. "Tom," Sarah transmits urgently, "you need to evacuate now. The creatures are moving toward your position." "Negative," Tom's voice responds. "We're maintaining extraction point Alpha." Elena says the geological instability will prevent safe helicopter evacuation, so we're your only way off this mountain. Sarah realizes the terrible mathematics of their situation. David's team has essential information about a threat that could destroy human civilization, but they're trapped on a collapsing mountain with limited escape routes and pursuit by creatures that know their every move. "There is another option," David says quietly, apparently reading her thoughts through their enhanced awareness. "We could go back down." "Back down?" Sarah stares at her brother in disbelief. "Into that thing?" "The neural center is vulnerable during emergence. If we could reach it with enough electrical charge, disable its higher cognitive functions, we might be able to force it back into hibernation." Maria shakes her head. "David, the risk of doing nothing is extinction," David interrupts. "This creature has had 10 years to study us, to learn our weaknesses. If it reaches full emergence with that knowledge intact, humanity won't survive the encounter." Sarah looks at the faces of the survivors, people who've endured a decade of unimaginable horror and now face a choice between personal survival and species survival. She sees the same determination in their eyes that she remembers from David's childhood, the same refusal to accept defeat that made him such a dedicated climber. "What would you need?" she asks. Alex produces a device from his pack that looks like a cross between a climbing anchor and an electrical capacitor. "We've been preparing for this possibility. High voltage discharge directly into the neural center could disrupt the bioelectrical fields that maintain consciousness." "It's suicide," Sarah states flatly. "Maybe," David agrees. "But staying on the surface definitely is. And if we're going to die anyway, we might as well take this thing with us." Another roar echoes from the depths, and this time it's answered by similar calls from Mount Baker and Mount Rainier. The creature isn't just emerging from Glacier Ridge, it's coordinating emergence across its entire network. Sarah keys her radio. "Elena, Tom, Melissa, are you getting readings from other peaks in the range?" "Confirmed," Elena responds grimly. "Mount Baker shows signs of imminent surface breach. Mount Rainier is showing preliminary emergence activity." "Sarah, whatever's happening, it's not limited to Glacier Ridge." Sarah looks at her brother, seeing in his haunted eyes the weight of knowledge that goes beyond personal survival. After 10 years of being studied by an alien intelligence, he understands the scope of the threat in ways that no one else can. "How long do we have?" she asks. David checks the mountain's tremors, his enhanced senses reading geological signals like a seismograph. 20 minutes until full neural emergence. After that, the creature will have access to its complete knowledge, base and full motor control. "Then we go down," Sarah decides. "All of us." The descent into Glacier Ridge's thermal core defies every survival instinct Sarah has developed over 10 years of mountain climbing. The tunnel walls pulse with bioluminescent veins that provide an eerie blue-green light, and the air grows thick with humidity that carries an organic sweetness she tries not to identify. "Stay close to the thermal channels," David instructs as they navigate deeper into the creature's body. "The electrical fields are stronger there. It helps mask our biosignatures from the antibody organisms." Sarah helps Maria through a section where the tunnel floor has become soft and yielding, like walking on living tissue. The injured geologist maintains her scientific observations despite their desperate circumstances. The internal architecture suggests a highly evolved symbiotic system, Maria notes. These aren't just digestive chambers, they're processing facilities designed to integrate complex organic matter while preserving specific neural patterns. English, please, Sarah gasps, struggling with the increasingly thick atmosphere. It doesn't just eat people, Alex translates grimly. It absorbs their knowledge and personality while keeping their consciousness intact as a kind of internal library. The implication hits Sarah like a physical blow. You mean the other missing climbers are still here, Rachel confirms. Still aware, still experiencing everything. The creature doesn't just consume memory, it preserves the entire experiential record as a form of entertainment. They reach a junction where the tunnel branches in 3 directions. David pauses, his enhanced senses reading bioelectrical signals that guide their navigation. Neural centers through the left passage about 200 meters down. But we're going to encounter heavier defenses. As if summoned by his words, movement flickers in Sarah's peripheral vision. The pale creatures they encountered on the surface are present here too, but in far greater numbers. They cling to the tunnel walls like living decorations, their multifaceted eyes tracking the intruder's movement. They're not attacking, Sarah observes. Not yet, David agrees. The creature is curious about why we returned. It's analyzing our intentions before deciding whether to eliminate us or absorb us. Sarah checks her climbing gear, ensuring the electrical device Alex constructed is properly secured to her harness. The plan is desperate in its simplicity: reach the neural center and discharge enough electrical energy to disrupt the creature's emergence process. Whether they survive the attempt is a secondary consideration. Sarah, Elena's voice crackles. Through the earpiece, barely audible through the bioelectrical interference, surface readings show the creature is beginning physical emergence. We're detecting massive displacement of rock and soil across multiple peaks. How long? Sarah responds. Minutes, not hours. Whatever you're planning, it needs to happen now. They move deeper into the neural center passage, and Sarah begins to understand the true scope of what they're facing. The tunnel walls are lined with translucent chambers, each containing what appears to be a preserved human figure suspended in some kind of biological fluid. The missing climbers, she whispers. David nods grimly. 15 years of disappearances. They're all here, all still conscious within the preservation matrix. The creature has been building a comprehensive database of human knowledge and experience. Sarah recognizes some of the faces from missing person reports she studied during her own search for David. Young, experienced climbers who vanished without a trace, now serving as living archives for an alien intelligence. We're going to get them out, she states. Sarah, that's not possible, Maria argues. The preservation process is irreversible. Removing them from the matrix would be fatal. Then we make sure this thing never emerges to use what it's learned from them. They reach the neural center just as the mountain experiences its most violent tremor yet. The chamber ahead opens into a vast cavern whose walls pulse with veins of bioelectrical energy. At the center, a massive organic structure resembling a brain made of crystallized coral dominates the space. But they're not alone. Figures move in the shadows around the neural core humans, but changed. Their skin has the same pale, translucent quality as the creature's antibody organisms, and their movements show the same coordinated purpose. The genetics researchers, David explains quietly. The ones who originally discovered this organism. It absorbed them decades ago, but they're still functional as a kind of management system. One of the figures turns toward them, and Sarah recognizes what had once been human features beneath the alien transformation. When it speaks, its voice carries harmonics that suggest multiple vocal cords. David Chen, the transformed human says. You have returned with surface intelligence. This was not anticipated. Neither was our escape, David replies, raising his electrical weapon. But we're full of surprises. The surface emergence cannot be prevented. Geological pressures have reached critical thresholds. This organism will achieve full mobility within 7 minutes. Sarah studies the neural core, noting the electrical patterns that flow through its crystalline structure. Alex, can your device disrupt something that size? If we can get close enough to make direct contact, Alex confirms. But those things aren't going to let us walk up to their brain. The transformed humans begin moving toward them with coordinated precision. But they're not attacking. They're herding the intruders toward specific positions around the neural core. They want us here, Rachel realizes. This isn't defense, it's integration protocol. Sarah feels vibrations through the cavern floor. That suggests the creature's emergence is accelerating. Above them, the mountain is literally rising as the organism pushes toward the surface. They have minutes, maybe less, before the neural core achieves full connectivity with its surface appendages. New plan, Sarah announces, pulling explosive charges from her climbing gear. We don't try to sneak up on the brain, we bring the brain to us. She begins placing charges around the chamber's support structures while David and his team position themselves to defend against the transformed humans. The plan is suicidal, but it's their only chance to prevent the creature from achieving full emergence with its accumulated knowledge intact. Sarah, David says as she arms the final charge, if this works, if we manage to stop this thing, what happens to us? She looks at her brother, seeing in his face the toll of 10 years living inside an alien organism. Even if they survive the explosion, even if they escape the collapsing mountain, David and his team have been fundamentally changed by their experience. We figure it out together, she replies, activating the detonator sequence. The explosion that follows doesn't just shake the mountain, it convulses the entire creature's nervous system. The neural core erupts in a cascade of bioelectrical discharge that sends feedback through every fiber of the organism's vast body. But as the cavern begins to collapse around them, Sarah realizes their desperate gambit has had an unexpected consequence. The creature isn't dying, it's fragmenting, breaking apart into smaller, independent organisms that retain portions of its accumulated knowledge. They've prevented a single coordinated extinction event, but they may have created something worse, multiple smaller threats that will be harder to track and contain. As rock and debris rain down around them, Sarah grabs David's hand and runs toward what she hopes is an escape route. Behind them, the fragmented neural cores begin their own emergence protocols, each one carrying a piece of the ancient hunger that has awakened in the mountains. The fight for human survival is just beginning. The collapsing cavern becomes a maze of falling stone and ruptured bioelectrical conduits as Sarah pulls David toward what appears to be an emergency thermal vent. Behind them, the fragmenting neural cores emit discordant harmonics that suggest the creature's consciousness is splitting into dozens of smaller, independent entities. This way, Rachel shouts over the chaos, her enhanced senses detecting air currents that indicate a route to the surface. They scramble through a fissure that opens just wide enough for human passage, climbing upward through what feels like the creature's death throes. But Sarah realizes with growing horror that the organism isn't dying, it's reproducing. Each neural fragment that breaks away carries a portion of the parent creature's knowledge and hunger. David, she gasps as they navigate a section where the walls are literally bleeding. What have we done? Bought time, he replies grimly. The fragments won't have the parent organism's coordination or accumulated knowledge. They'll be easier to track, easier to contain. Or they'll spread across the continent as individual threats. Maria counters, supporting herself on Alex's shoulder as they climb. The thermal vent ahead shows the first hint of natural light dawn is breaking over Glacier Ridge, revealing the true scope of the disaster they've unleashed. Through the opening, Sarah can see the mountain's summit has been completely transformed. What was once granite peaks now shows organic spires reaching toward the sky like the ribs of some massive carcass. Surface contact. Alana's voice crackles through the earpiece as they emerge onto a ledge. Sarah, thank God. What's your status? Alive, but we've got bigger problems, Sarah responds, surveying the transformed landscape. The creature is fragmenting. We're looking at multiple smaller entities instead of one coordinated threat. We know, Tom's voice cuts in. We're tracking at least 15 separate heat signatures, moving away from Glacier Ridge, some heading toward populated areas. Sarah helps David climb out of the thermal vent, noting how the morning light reveals the full extent of his transformation. His skin has the same translucent quality she observed in the creature's antibody organisms, and his eyes reflect light with an inhuman intensity. David, she says quietly, are you still human? He considers the question with disturbing objectivity. Biologically, mostly, neurologically? That's more complicated. 10 years of neural integration doesn't just leave you unchanged, it leaves you connected. As if to demonstrate his point, David suddenly freezes, his head tilting as if listening to something only he can hear. Fragment 7 is moving toward Seattle. Fragment 12 is heading north toward Vancouver. They're following population centers. How can you know that? Sarah asks. Because I'm still partially connected to the network, David admits. We all are. It's how we survived so long, and it's how we can help track the fragments now. Alex nods in agreement. The neural linking works both ways. We can sense the fragments' locations and intentions, but they can also sense us. We're going to be targets. Sarah's earpiece erupts with urgent transmissions as emergency agencies across the Pacific Northwest begin coordinating responses to what appears to be a widespread biological crisis. Reports flood in of strange creatures emerging from caves and thermal vents, moving with purpose toward major cities. This is Detective Morrison. Linda's voice cuts through the chaos. I'm coordinating with federal agencies on containment protocols. Sarah, we need your team down here immediately. They're the only ones who understand what we're dealing with. Sarah looks at David and his companions, seeing in their transformed faces the weight of responsibility for a crisis they helped create, and the unique knowledge needed to address it. They've traded one extinction-level threat for multiple smaller ones, but they're also the only humans with inside knowledge of how these fragments think and operate. Tom, Sarah transmits, can you extract US from this position? Helicopter inbound. ETA 5 minutes. But Sarah, the fragments aren't just moving towards cities. They're communicating with each other. Whatever coordination ability the parent organism had, the fragments are trying to re-establish it. David closes his eyes, his enhanced senses. Reading the bioelectrical chatter between the scattered entities, they're adapting faster than we anticipated. Fragment coordination will be re-established within hours, not days. Then we stop them before they can reconnect, Sarah states, with a determination that surprises even herself. Maria manages a weak smile despite her injuries. And how exactly do we stop 15 mountain-sized creatures with a taste for human consciousness? We use what we learned, Sarah replies, checking her remaining climbing gear. We know their weaknesses, their behavioral patterns. And we have something they want. She gestures toward David and his team. You're still connected to the network. You're like living beacons to them. They'll come to you. Sarah, David says quietly, are you suggesting we use ourselves as bait? I'm suggesting we use everything we have to prevent these things from reaching populated areas. Your connection to them is an advantage, not just a vulnerability. The helicopter approaches through the morning haze, its rotors cutting through air that still carries the organic sweetness of the creature's emergence. As they prepare for extraction, Sarah takes one last look at the transformed landscape of Glacier Ridge. The mountain that claimed her brother 10 years ago is now a monument to humanity's first contact with a form of life older than civilization itself. But it's also proof that even impossible odds can be overcome when people refuse to surrender hope. "Alina," she transmits as the helicopter settles onto their precarious landing zone, "start coordinating with geological surveys across the range. If there are other dormant organisms, we need to identify them before they start responding to the fragment's emergence." "Already in progress," Alina responds. "But Sarah, there's something else. The bioelectrical discharges from the fragmentation are triggering responses from other thermal networks. We might be looking at a cascading awakening across multiple mountain ranges." Sarah helps David into the helicopter, noting how he instinctively positions himself to maintain sensory contact with the neural fragments scattered across the landscape. 10 years of captivity have made him into something no longer entirely human, but also something uniquely qualified to threat they've unleashed. "Then we'd better get to work," she says, settling into the aircraft as it lifts off from the devastated mountain. Below them, Glacier Ridge smolders in the morning light, its thermal vents still releasing wisps of steam that carry the scent of ancient hunger. But for the first time in a decade, Sarah feels genuinely hopeful. She has her brother back, even if he's changed beyond recognition. And together, they have the knowledge needed to prevent humanity's extinction. The fight is far from over. If anything, it's just beginning. But as the helicopter carries them toward the next phase of their struggle, Sarah realizes that some battles are worth fighting regardless of the odds. The fragments may carry the memory of an ancient hunger, but they've never faced the determination of a sister who spent 10 years refusing to give up hope. The mountain may have awakened, but so has humanity's capacity to fight for its survival. And in the growing light of a new dawn, that might be enough.